In this video we're going to show you how to go ahead and use JBM Ballistics programming to fill in our ballistic table templates here that we went over on the last video. Okay, so first we got to pick a template that we're going to use, and today I'm going to I'm going to do a template. I was going to do it for the different rifle, but I'm going to do a new one for one of my old rifles. It's a Ruger M77 243, and it has a Super Sniper 10 power scope, one of the old models, where it has the minute of angle turrets and the mil-dot reticle. Okay, now so you'd have to pick this based on your optic, and I want to do it. I want a compact set of tables here, so I'm going to choose it in 100-meter increments. And I could like to use yards, but I prefer meters, so I'm going to use 100-meter increments. And it's not a minute of angles reticle, so we're going to use this one here. This is in minutes of angle and milliradians in 100-meter increments. So the milliradians is for the mil-dot reticle, and the minutes of angle is for the turrets. And I'm just going to go through this one so you guys can see an example of how this would go. So double click. Okay, there we are. So there's a template. And if you can see this, we have all the different fields like we went over earlier that we need to fill in. So let's go ahead and do that so you can see what the process looks like. First thing, let's just start from the top and work our way down. So it's asking for a cartridge. That's going to be 243 Winchester. Asking for a bullet. I'm using a 105 grain A Max. Powder is Reloader 19. The primer is a CCI. Okay? And then the calculated drop tables for barometric pressure, I'm just going to go with a 30. And this will be my primary table because that's the pressure zone closest to what I'm operating in. And I'm going to do these in even increments of 10. So the next one is, or divisible by 10. So the next barometric pressure zone that I'm going to do for the next set of tables will be 29, and I'll do another one for 28, and so on until I cover all my area of operations that I could potentially be working in with this rifle. Okay, so here's 30, and this is in units of inches of mercury. Now if you want to use millibars, that's fine. Just type in millibars, and then when you go through and do your JBM Ballistics, make sure you match this. And correct in muzzle velocity at air and ammo temperature 0 through 100, so I'm going to keep using the 0 through 100 degrees. The rifle model, okay, so I'm using it's a Ruger M77 VT. Barrel condition, well broke in 26-inch stainless steel barrel. I believe, if I'm not crazy, it's a 1 9-inch twist. That's something you'd want to look up if you don't know that for sure. Okay, so there's a length twist, no muzzle device, and these tables were optimized, and then I'll put in a date here. What's the date today? August 16th, 8/16. 2013. Holy smokes, we're in the future. Okay, the zero range for this rifle is actually going to be, I'm going to zero this at 100 meters this time. So we'll just call it 100 meters. And it was optimized by me, Rex. Okay. Barometric pressure, let's repeat that up here, 30.0 inches of mercury. Don't forget your units. Okay, so alright, we have all that data figured out here. Now what we're going to do is, alright, we do have our meters and we have all the right units. If you did want to use different temperature, like instead of Fahrenheit, if you wanted to use Celsius, you can go ahead and just click in these boxes and type in Celsius here, you know, like Celsius, and then you can adjust these accordingly. You can delete cells. You know, you can just delete the row of cells or whatever to custom fit that to your operational conditions. So what we're going to work on first here is just our bullet drop. So next thing we have to know is our muzzle velocities at these different temperature ranges. Now this is dependent upon ammunition temperature. So we're going to have to consult our curve here. So here's our ammunition temperature muzzle velocity variation curve that we did before. And down here we have the different ammunition temperatures in degrees Fahrenheit and the corresponding muzzle velocity at that temperature. So we're going to use these muzzle velocities to set up our ballistic template here. So let's go ahead and take a look at the template. Our first temperature reading here is 0 degrees is at 2,900 feet a second. So 0 is 2,900. Right now we're looking for 20 degrees. Now the first few of these are not in 10 degree increments, you're going to note, because at the lower temperatures the curve is flatter, so there's less of a difference between the ballistic data. So I have those spread out a little more. When you get up into the hotter temperatures, the curve really takes off and gets a little steeper. So it's more important to have those in closer increments degree-wise. So our next one was 20 degrees, so 2914. 2914. Our next one is 40 degrees. So let's go ahead and find 40 degrees, 2936. 2936. Okay, and our next one is 50 degrees, 2952. 2952. 60 degrees, right now we're in 10 meter increments, or 10 degree increments. So 60 is 2971. 70 is 2995. 80, oh mercy, I'm having a heck of a time. 3025. 3025. 90 is 3062. And you'll notice how they're increasing faster as you get up towards the higher temperatures. And 100 was 3109, really smoking. Okay, so now we have our temperatures typed in, or now we have our muzzle velocities typed into the corresponding temperature. Alright, so the next step after we have our muzzle velocities typed in for our different ammunition temperature ranges is going to JBM Ballistics. So let's open that up and see what it looks like. Okay, so here's JBMBallistics.com. JBMBallistics.com up here, okay? So you're going to have the ballistics tab over here. Let's just click on that. Okay, now you're going to have lots of different options. So this is a pretty neat website. It has a lot to offer. Back up a little bit for you guys. And without getting into too much detail right away, we're not going to explain all these different definitions of these things in this video, but we are going to follow up immediately after we get our ballistics tables, show you how to set those up. I'm going to go through and explain what's going on here. So first we're just going to go through it, and then I'll come back and explain afterwards. Okay, so if you have a question, just hang on to it until we get into the next few videos. So we're just going to click on the trajectory tab here and take a look. Okay, this is a trajectory tab. Now this is where we input our data. So we're going to have a few options here, and if you scroll down you'll notice that there's a lot of inputs, kind of intimidating looking. So before we get to the bottom there. So I'll show you which ones to worry about for now, and then we'll come back and explain exactly why all these different things are the way they are after a little bit. So let's take a look at this top portion here, and we're going to enter in the information, the input data for the bullet we are using. Now they have a bullet library here, and the ballistic coefficient, the weight, and the caliber. If your bullet is not in the library here, don't panic. You'll be able to enter in your ballistic coefficient and it'll do a pretty accurate calculation. However, if your bullet is in the bullet library, one of the nice things about using this, and you got to scroll down to find your bullet. It has all different kinds. I'm going to go down. I'm using the Hornady. Oh, I was going to Sierra. Okay. Hornady 243 caliber AMAX. Okay. So I'm going to select that. Oh, you can't see it, can you? So I found my AMAX. I'm going to click on that. Okay, now my ballistic data is entered. Now a lot of these different bullet companies have much more detailed information when it comes to the varying ballistic coefficients at different velocities. And as your bullet starts to fly out through the atmosphere, it's going to immediately start decelerating. It's going to start slowing down. And as your bullet changes speed, your ballistic coefficient will change speed out there. And that can be a pretty complex math problem to try to do by hand or to try to set up on an Excel sheet alone. So one of the nice things about JBM Ballistics is if you select from the library, depending on the data that they have in that library, the ballistic data, it can be very precise. And next thing I'm going to fill out here, even though, just to make sure, it already might know what the ballistic data is, but I'm just going to type in the ballistic coefficient, which is 500 for the AMAX, and the weight is 105 grain. The caliber is 243 inches. And you can do metric, but I'd prefer inches there, whatever it's in. Okay. The next thing you're going to want to fill out here is your muzzle velocity. Okay? Now you're going to want to fill this out for each given temperature range. What we're going to do is we're going to do one of these JBM calculations for each of these different temperature ranges. So for example, we're going to do one at 2,900 feet a second and 0 degrees Fahrenheit. And then we'll get the data and we'll paste it in. The next one we're going to do is for 2,914 feet a second at 20 degrees Fahrenheit, all the way up to our 100 degrees. So that's what that's going to look like. So let me just pan back here so I don't lose you again. And let's go ahead and see what that looks like, how the inputs go. So at, what did we say? 2,900 feet a second. We'll just go in logical order here from the beginning to the end. So 2,900 feet per second. Now the distance to the chronograph is 10 feet. Okay. Now when I chronograph these and got my muzzle velocity variation curve, my chronograph I always keep at 10 feet. That's just a constant you want to do in the field when you're measuring your velocities. We talked about that earlier. The sight height on this particular rifle, that's another column you're going to want to fill out. Now if your chronograph is a different distance, enter it in there. Sight height on my rifle is 1.75 inches. You don't need to worry about for now the sight offset, zero height, offset zero, all this stuff here. Don't worry about that for now. For now, just fill in your muzzle velocity, your distance to the chronograph, and your sight height for this section. Okay, we're going to scroll down, and let's look at the wind speed. Okay, now the wind speed, I would recommend doing that in for a 10 mile an hour direct crosswind, 90 degrees. So just go ahead and leave that in there, 10 miles an hour. And if you want to do kilometers an hour, that's fine. But I would recommend doing it in units of 10. So if you're going to pick kilometers an hour or feet per second or meters a second, well, if you do feet a second or meters a second, do it as something divisible by 10 at least. That way, when you're interpolating between the values to get an exact calculation, it'll be easier if it's divisible by 10. So I'm going to go with miles per hour and 10 miles an hour. Always keep your wind angle at 90 degrees. If that changes, we're going to just take it and use cosines. And I'll show you how to apply all this later on once we get the charts completely made up. Target speed, same thing here. Keep it divisible by 10 or multipliable by 10. So I'm actually going to go with 1 foot per second here. Okay? And target angle, again, we're just going to keep that 90 degrees. We can multiply by cosines. So, and the reason I do this is because sometimes in the field it's easier for moving target acquisition, is what this is for. You can pretty easily calculate just by a glance a target that is moving. How many feet is it covering per second? And that's a real easy thing. There's no calculations really involved. And then you take whatever that is times this value. So if it's moving at 5 feet per second, you would take whatever the correction is for the 1 foot per second, multiply by 5. I'll show you how to apply that later. So I'm going to pick 1 foot per second, 90 degrees. Target height, you don't need to worry about that for right now. That's for something else. We can explain that later. Minimum range. The first range I'm going to want on my data here is 100. And the maximum range, I'm going to just go ahead and say for 243, we're going to do 1500, and we'll come back later and double check that. Like you'll see in a minute how that works out. But you're going to want to overshoot what you anticipate your max range to be so that you have enough ballistic data to get out there. And I'll show you how to determine what that max range is. Range increments for this set of tables, we are going in 100-meter increments, right? Now, if I was doing 10-meter increments, I would choose 10. But being that we're doing the smaller ballistic tables, we're doing increments of 100. This is a more compact version. So, where's our range increments here? So our range increments we're going to keep at 100. Our zero range, I'm going to zero this rifle at 100 meters. So if I was at a standard American rifle range that's 100 yards, I'd have to note that I'd have to change this to 91.4, okay? So if you're zeroing your rifle at a rifle range, a 100-yard rifle range in America, and your chart is in meters, or your ballistic tables are in meters, you're going to change this to 91.4 because that's how many meters are in 100 yards, okay? So, but I'm just going to do this out in the field. I can zero at whatever range I want. I'm just going to go out in the field. So I'm going to leave that at 100. Now our temperature here, that's an important one. You're going to want to make sure that we match that up to whatever column we're in. So that muzzle velocity we typed up here earlier, the 2,900 feet a second, was recorded at an ambient air temperature of 0 degrees. And the ammunition temperature was at 0 degrees as well. So that's our conditions. So that's our temperature. The pressure, we said before, was 30.0, okay, because that's what we're setting up our tables for. If you remember up on top here, we have our barometric pressure. And like I said, you want that divisible or multipliable in tens so that you can do interpolation between them easier. Okay, so there we go. We have that. Our pressure is there. And our humidity. Now this is something that's going to vary based on basically your conditions. I would type in the humidity that's the average conditions for your area of operations. And if you remember from the humidity videos, it's a very, very, very tiny deflection for humidity differences out in the field in reality. It's not like the 23-10 or a lot of the sniper manuals read. It's not that much of an adjustment. They say that it's quite a bit more than it really is. But when you figure out the actual math here, you could type in pretty much any humidity and it would hardly tweak your ballistic drop at all. But for just the sake of being as close as we can, we're just going to go ahead and put 50 in there is what a lot of guys do. Now if you do want to get it super precise, I can show you how to set up a humidity constant that you could multiply by later that you could correct for humidity precisely, but it's going to be very, very tiny amounts it's actually going to move you. Ammunition temperature is going to have a lot bigger effect than humidity and things like that. Altitude, we're just going to leave that alone for now, and I'll show you why in a second. Pressure is corrected. Okay, now this box is checked. Anytime you see a check box, you want to look at that carefully. So let's click on the old question mark and see what they're talking about. Pressure is corrected. Okay, check this box if the pressure entered is a corrected station pressure. If it's an absolute pressure, which is what we're going to be doing in the field, we're going to use absolute pressures. You're going to measure the pressure in the field because corrected station pressure is totally different. You'd have to type in your altitude then. That's what meteorologists use to try to get pressure trends over large areas so they can see what the weather's going to do. But for measuring atmospheric density like we're concerned with, you're just going to use absolute pressure. So we're using absolute pressure, so leave this box unchecked. Okay, so we'll hit the backwards arrow here. Okay, so where were we at? So here's our pressure box. We're going to leave that unchecked because we're going to be doing absolute. Okay, so that's one thing you want to do for sure. Vital zone, radius, and that's talking about point blank zero range and things like this. Energy column, we're going to want our energy reported in whatever units you want. Most guys use foot pounds, but here's a lot of different units of muzzle energy or remaining energy at the different ranges. Okay, and then we have our columns. Now this is what are we going to use for columns? On our charts here, we are using minutes of angle for our elevation and milliradians for our windage and moving target acquisition hold off because we're using a scope, like I said earlier, that's a mil dot scope, but it's one of the old ones where they only had them available in minutes of angle. So for this one, we're going to go ahead and select accordingly. Okay, and to do that, let me adjust this here. Is you got to type in where'd we go? Column 1. Okay, so this is in units of what? Minutes of angle. Okay. And column 2, this is going to give us our output data. Okay. So our second column we're going to want in mils, milliradians right here, MRADs. So those two columns here, this one, and this one, you're going to want to select accordingly. If you're using a milliradian scope, where the turrets are in mils, then you could just go ahead and do straight mils across. You could put mils here, and everything will be in mils, so you don't have data screwing up. But for this particular scope, it's a mixed optic. It's one of the ones that we were trying to avoid earlier, but some of you may have been stuck with these. Most of the military scopes are actually set up this way. The Unertl and the M3A Leopold are set up in minutes, but they have a mil reticle. So I'll show you how to do this when it's mixed. So here we go. I'm selecting minutes of angle and mils. Okay. Next thing you're going to want to look at here is there's a lot of different little things here where you can check the boxes. And the first one that's checked, we want to go through and make sure everything's correct. Elevation correction for zero range. Let's click on the question mark there and see what the heck they're talking about. Alright, elevation correction for zero range. Or drop correction causes the elevation to be raised as required to cause the bullet to cross the line of sight at the zero range. Without this box checked, the zero range is ignored. Okay, so we want to leave that checked because we don't want to ignore our zero range. Okay, so it's always good to go through and double check what all these boxes mean. So that's what we're trying to learn how to do here. So we'll leave that checked. Next one is range in meters. Do we want to range in meters? Well, our template that we're using, I selected meters. Oh, sorry, I selected meters on that. So we're going to go ahead and use range in meters. If you're using yards, you're just going to leave that unchecked. Okay, so that's dependent on whether you're using yards or meters. I'm using meters, so I'm checking it. Now the zero at the max point blank range, we don't need to worry about that. Include extra rows, include danger space. These are all things we can talk about later in advanced external ballistics a little more. Windage correction for zero range, we're not going to check that. Target relative drops. Let's see what that's talking about. What does that mean, huh? So we'll click on the question mark and we'll go up on top here. It calculates the bullet drop relative to the target and not to the line of sight. These values are only different when the cant angle is non-zero. Okay, so we don't need to worry about it because it's only different if the cant angle is non-zero. Oh, where's our deal here? So we'll back up. So we'll go ahead and just leave that checked. That's going to be fine. Mark the sound barrier crossing. This is what you're going to need to determine your maximum range for every given velocity and temperature column. Okay, because that's going to vary for atmospheric density and velocity based on when your bullet goes through the transonic barrier. It's going to destabilize, and it's going to go through that. Once it goes subsonic, it's not stable anymore unless you're using balanced flight technology, like on the 408 Shitax. You're going to want to know this max sound barrier crossing. And then, okay, round output to whole numbers. We're going to just leave it in decimal form. When you're all done with that, you can hit the calculate button. So let's go ahead and calculate. Okay. So here's what we have here. We have all our input data and our output data. And we have our ballistic data. So we have our range, our drop in units of minutes and in mils, and our windage in minutes and mils, and our velocities and our Mach. Now the Mach here is that's the speed of sound. Mach 1 is the speed of sound. Mach 2 is twice the speed of sound. Okay. So once you break from the ones to below 1, like a 0.9, that's your first that's your sonic barrier right here. So this is highlighted because we checked that box. So that's our max range at that temperature, 1100 meters at 0 degrees with these loads. Okay, and then we have our energy, our time of flight, which we're going to need for other things, and our lead in minutes and in mils. Okay, so what we're going to do, and the thing is, in order to get the data pasted into here correctly, we're going to have to be able to put it in a different form. Because one thing about this is I'm going to try to select one column at a time, and I can't do it. Just the way these are set up here on the computer, I can't grab one column at a time, copy and paste. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to select all this, and we're going to save it in Word, or in a program similar to Word. So let's open up a Word document real quick. Okay. So we're going to paste this in Word, and we're going to save this. For each column we're going to want to do our input and output things so that we know what we're looking at later. And now we can go ahead and select one column at a time. So we're going to want our drop data in minutes of angle. From 100 to, what was our thing? 1100 is our max range, okay? So, what was our thing? Man, I'm tired. You got to forgive me. Okay, so I've got that copied, and then we're going to simply come over here, go in here, and hit the old paste button. Bam. There we go. There is our drop data for that temperature increment, okay? Next one we're going to do is 20 degrees. So this is going to be quite easy. After we have all this stuff figured out at first, all we have to do is come back to JBM Ballistics. Right? That's not JBM. Where's JBM? Okay? Is we're going to hit the back arrow up here. Okay? Now we have all our stuff is saved from last time. We're not going to change anything in here except for, now if you do this all in one shot, it's going to be much easier. If you cancel out and start over, it's going to reset and you're going to have to type in everything. The likelihood for entering a wrong input variable increases exponentially. So let's just do this all in one shot. So our next velocity will be, what are we looking at? 2914. Okay? So our next velocity is 2914. We'll type that in. And that is at 20 degrees Fahrenheit. So where's our temperature? Okay, so we're not at 0, we're at 20 degrees now, Fahrenheit. Then we just hit calculate again on the bottom. Boom! There's our information for that new muzzle velocity and temperature. So we're going to copy that. We're going to come down here. We're going to stick it in here. And we're going to save this for later. And then again, we're going to have our drop. And now our max range is 1200 because the air is a little bit thinner as it warms up, and the muzzle velocity is a little higher, so the bullet's going to be able to fly supersonically for a greater range. So that's why that's like that. So we'll go ahead and paste that in there. Okay. So you'll see what we got going on. Let's do that for the next one. 40 degrees. All right. Sorry. Back up. Oh, crap. Hopefully it saved it. I hit the button twice. Okay, it did. That's a good thing. So our next one is 40 degrees. So we'll change our temperature to 40. And what was our muzzle velocity at 40 again? 2936. So 2936 this time. So you're just changing two things each time. 2936. Oh, crap. There we go. Well, this double check our inputs if we're not sure. 2936 at 40 degrees. Okay, so that's the one we wanted. So we're going to go ahead and grab these, copy, take them over to here. We're going to save these. Boom. Okay, so we need our drop up to our max range there. I'm going to copy and paste them in. Okay. Now our next one is 50 at 2952. So 50 at 2952. Back up. We have 2952 at 50 degrees. Okay? So you can just go through all these columns and basically do the exact same thing until we have all those stacked up and put into our ballistic table template. And I'll just finish this one and then I'll show you. Okay, there's that. So after you have all your formatting issues corrected, you want to just make sure that this is logical. Just double check, because you're typing in so much data and cutting and pasting so much stuff. You're looking at all these different numbers. It's easy to make a mistake. So you want to see a general trend in the cooler temperatures and lower velocities of your max ranges being less to high. So we have that. You also want to notice that your drop is going to get increasingly less as your muzzle velocity climbs and your temperature increases. So let's just look at 1,000 meters and we'll just do a real quick test. 39, 38, 36, 35, 34, 33, 31, 30, and 29. Okay, so we don't have anything pasted grossly in the wrong spot here as far as we can tell. But as long as these inputs are correctly entered and you have confirmed these muzzle velocities at these temperatures, this drop data is going to be very, very precise for this given barometric pressure reading. Okay, so you'll be surprised. If you're out in the field and you're practicing ammunition temperature discipline, you're actually measuring your temperatures and seeing where you should, which column you should use. It's going to be very, very close. Now, if you're in between these temperature ranges, you just simply interpolate between the two numbers. And I will show you how to interpolate between numbers in a very quick video coming pretty soon. So, next thing we're going to want to do in this table is we're going to go ahead and enter our wind data. Now it's going to be very much the same thing, except we're only going to need 0 degrees, 50 degrees, and 100 degrees. And that should totally cover a wind hold off. A lot of guys just use one in the middle, 50 degrees, because wind is so hard to measure anyways that it gives you a basic ballpark idea. But we're trying to be as precise as we can. We do want the ability to interpolate between them. So I have 3 different increments here that are evenly spaced apart. So let's just go back to our document and we'll look for the wind hold off for 0 degrees. Now this is in milliradians. The reason for that, as we discussed earlier, although our windage turret would be in minutes of angle, I'd strongly encourage you to hold off for your windage using the reticle. And being that this reticle is a mil dot reticle, we're going to have to put our wind hold offs here. And we'll get into more of that in the application of fire video. So let's just go here. This is that we've been saving all this, and we're going to go ahead and save that. We're going to save as 243 raw data. Or there we go. And then hit save. Okay, so we're going to come back to the word sheet here, and we're going to simply find our wind. Okay, now where was our windage? Here's our windage. Minutes of angle are mils. We're going to choose mils. We're going to select this out to our max range. We're going to copy, and we're going to jump back into our thing, and we're going to paste it in there. Bam! There it is. Now the next one's for 50 degrees. Okay, so let's find 50 degrees. Come back down. We're looking for, here's a temperature 40, temperature 50. Okay, so that's why we saved all that input data. Our windage here is going out to 1200. Copy and paste. Bam, there it is. And then the last one is 100. So we're going to scroll all the way down to the last one, which are, okay, so this is 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Our windage in mils out to the max range. Copy, paste it in there like so. Bam, there we go. And again, the formatting did change because it's a little goofy. We're going to highlight these cells. I'm going to hit the brush button up on top here. I don't know if you see what I'm doing. There's a little brush. That's kind of fixing the format, and we'll select all the areas we want formatted that way. Okay, so it fixed it. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing for moving target acquisition. 0 degrees, 50 degrees, and 100. So let's come back to our raw data. We'll start at 100, being that we're here already. So our lead, we're going to do that in mils as well, and for the same reasons, your moving targets are not always going to be constant. It's going to be hard to dial in for a moving target. You're going to want to lead that in by hold off in mils. So there's our moving targets for that. We'll come back and we'll work our way back to 50. There's our 50 degrees, so our lead here in mils. Mils is the same thing as MRADs, milliradians. Okay, and then 0 degrees. And we'll go back up to the first one. Okay, confirm it's 0. Just copy and paste. Bam. Okay, so after we have all our inputs entered into this template, and we double check to make sure they're logical and everything looks like it's arranged correctly, you can adjust the formatting, and we showed you how to do that by you can select the formatting of a given area, hit the paintbrush button, and then just drag it across where you want to reformat it. So you can keep the color and the little tiny white lines in between here, and you can reformat that. You can go up to the top and hit the little paint button or whatever and format it however you think it looks nice and pretty. But so what we're going to do here is you notice we kind of overshot our max distance on this chart. So the template's a little short, so we're going to simply just erase. So I'm going to hit this button, I'm going to highlight those, and I'm going to delete. There we go. So that adjusted that. Now you might have to account for that down here because it moved. So we'll move these down a little bit for the second half. And this is the spin drift. And it's being a turkey. It's not letting me just select it. But this is our spin drift table and our reticle table. And I'll show you guys how to set that up in a coming video. But for now, we're basically only concerned about this set of ballistic tables for now. So there we go. So now I have everything put in here. Let's double check. Let's read through everything. We forgot something here. For best results, keep ammunition at ambient air temperature. Tables calculated for the above listed barrel and load with optic mounted at 1.75 inches above the line of bore. Trajectories will vary as bore conditions change muzzle velocities over time. Be sure to confirm and log muzzle velocities throughout life of barrel. Calculated spin drift for, and then we can type that in when we do our spin drift. 105 grain AMAX and 1.9 inch or 1 and 9 twist, sorry. Okay, so we always want to make sure you get your commentary edited to make sure it makes sense. And we'll go ahead and save it. And all you have to do is go up here and print that bad boy. You can use some thick cardstock paper or a normal sheet of paper. You can laminate it. You can do whatever you want. And you'll have a good set of ballistic tables to work with right here. Now what you're going to want to do is, if you're operating in multiple climatic zones or multiple altitudes where you have different barometric pressure zones, you're going to want to go ahead and do one of these cards for each of your different barometric pressures in units divisible by 10. So the next one I would do is I would do 29 inches of mercury. And the next one after that would be 28 inches, 27 inches, all the way up to the max altitude barometric pressure zone that I'm going to be operating in. Okay, that's what I would do. And you'll have a separate table. So when you're at a certain air density zone up on a mountain, let's say, okay, it's only 26 inches of mercury, you're just going to go ahead and go to your cards and you're going to pull out the card that's for 27 or 26 inches of mercury, whatever zone you're operating in. And then this data is all arranged to make everything else after that point much quicker. Okay, and if you're in between two of these different barometric pressures, you can look at the number here and the number on the other barometric pressure card, for example, and interpolate between those. And again, interpolation video will be coming out pretty soon. So, only difference between this set of cards and the other ones, the more detailed ones, is that you have longer columns, and there's some other details in there as well. But we'll get to that after a while. But this should get you guys started. And you should be able to take one of these bad boys out in the field and you'll be surprised how close it's going to get you. The reason it's going to be off is because you're not going to be used to checking all your various conditions in the field. So you might forget to you know, check your barometric pressure, for example, and that'll throw you off. You might forget to check your ammunition temperature. That will significantly throw you off. So most of your problems in the field are going to be due to a lack of correcting for or measuring your environmental and meteorological conditions accurately, or one of your inputs might be incorrect too. So you want to go back through JBM and make sure you had everything inputted in there exactly correct, and you had all your boxes checked like we showed you earlier. If you do all that correctly, these will be within an inch or two, even at 1,000 meters. Very, very precise math. It's most of the problems are caused to just a lack of attention to detail on those matters. And it does take practice. There's a heck of a lot to keep track of when we're talking about external ballistics and internal ballistics. And there could be another, you know, there could be multitudes of things that could be throwing you off. For example, about a month ago, I noticed that my necks were getting a little long on my cases again. And, you know, as you trim those necks over time, the case dimensions do slowly start to change. The tension but that the neck has on the bullet can change slightly. So as your brass changes and wears out, and as your bore breaks in, your muzzle velocities will be affected by all those things. Internal ballistics will affect your external ballistics. So as your rifle breaks in, as your coppering levels change, as your bore is dirty or clean, if you just clean your rifle, that will tremendously sometimes change your velocities enough to put you in a whole different category. And as you'll notice, one thing you can see once you finally have these charts made up is you can just ponder the differences. So at 1,000 meters, the difference between 50 degrees and 70 degrees is a significant difference. It's, you know, 2 minutes of angle at 1,000. That's like a couple feet almost, you know, so that's quite a bit of distance there. So it's just something you definitely want to keep track of, because small errors can basically be accelerated or amplified the further out you go. So after you have this set of charts, you can go out and start playing with these as you're still probably all breaking in your barrels, or if you have a rifle that you've been using for a while, it might be fully broken. But continue to log your muzzle velocity variation. You want to do that continuously in the field. So take your chronograph out there and keep track of your muzzle velocities. If it seems like it's hitting right on where it should be, your muzzle velocity inputs are correct. If it's not, that's the first thing you want to check, is your muzzle velocity variation. See if something didn't move. But if you're doing that, these should be very, very good. And for weird circumstances where your ammunition temperature is going to be very different than your ambient air temperature, where this number here would not line up with this, for example, we're going to have to do a calc form where we independently correct for each of our different factors. And I'll show you how to do that in a different part of the ballistics table series. But for now, we're showing you how to do these hasty cards, these hasty ballistic table cards. And this is how you get your templates set up. So that should be fun for a while, and I'll catch you guys. We're going to go back and go through some more detail as to why is your maximum range the supersonic range of the bullet. We're going to explain what happens in bullet flight. So we're going to go through advanced external ballistics here, and then we'll move on and show you how to get your other tables set up. And after we understand some of those things, we'll be able to start applying all this information, and we'll do application of fire and lots of other videos. We're going to go through shooting positions and all kinds of fun stuff. So stay tuned, there's lots more to come. Your love takes me to the unknown, into what can I do?